Hello, beloveds, and welcome one and all. What a glorious time we're living in. And I call it a glorious time because it depends upon the perspective from which I am looking. And as I begin to simply pause in this moment before delivering my message and breathe, I want to consciously invite us to do the same. Too many times we go through life without breathing. And we may have even come out of meditation feeling really good. And then once all the announcements and once life happens and all of those kinds of things, we get back into this place of maybe anxiety or strife or fear. And it may be something that begins to happen for us unconsciously. And that's why it's so important for us to take conscious moments and conscious breaths. So I invite you right now to put a hand on your chest and to put a hand on your belly. If you're comfortable doing that right where you are, and if you can do that comfortably right where you are. And as you take your inhale, I'd like you to breathe in from your belly. Just breathe in from your belly. And don't let the chest move yet, not that full deep breath, but just a belly breath. Allow your shoulders to rest. And now on that second breath, take a big old belly breath and then allow your lungs all the way in your chest to expand so you can actually feel the rise and the fall of both hands. And you might even sigh or make a noise. It's one of the methods and one of the things that I use to just get fully present. And so as we begin this week's message, I just wanted to be fully present with you. And I was inviting you to be fully present with me by consciously taking that breath. Now, we're going to embark upon a topic today that is a little bit kind of funny to me, but also super important. And I'm going to tie it into some other things in life. Our theme this year has been Living Everyday Wonder. Our topic for the month of August is nature. And today our talk title is The Furry, the Fuzzy, the Slimy, the Scaly, and everyone else. So yeah, we're going to be talking a lot about nature and about life itself and how it shows up. And by the end of my talk today, it is my invitation, and I trust that each of us could really say, I embrace all of life, including the fuzzy, the furry, the slimy, and the tiny. So let's see if we can get there, right? So when I think about the furry and the fuzzy and the slimy and the scaly, immediately off the bat, we're talking about animals and the animal kingdom. And for a moment, if you think about, or if you want to close your eyes, if it's safe to do so, and you think about the furry and the fuzzy, immediately for some of us who are indeed animal lovers or self-professed animal lovers, we might indeed just start thinking about our little four-leggeds, you know, the kitties, the dogs, right? We start thinking about those animals that have been domesticated. Some of us might even have guinea pigs at home or some lizards, or, you know, we might have rats, hamsters, gerbils. I am naming a bunch of them, right? Now, when we start to think about the slimy and maybe scaly, I already mentioned kind of the lizards, you know, how many of us have snakes and bearded dragons and birds, you know, we didn't even mention the feathered, you know, but those can be fuzzy feathered friends as well. It's interesting to notice your reaction. It's kind of like sometimes I'm already getting deep. It's kind of like sometimes our reactions to people when we start labeling people or describing people, right? Like, oh, someone might go, oh, a gerbil, ooh, I don't know, a possum, a bear, lions and tigers and bears, oh my. You know, like we might notice that if we're talking about our domesticated animals, like our cats and dogs that are seen in the city much, it's okay. And we have these warm feelings towards them, or we think about maybe a pet that we've had that became a family member. And we think about the love that we share. And I know that I have people in my life who say, you know, I get along better with my animals than I do human beings. And they can relate better with their animals than they do humans. And I know for sure there have been, admittedly so, and I don't have any shame about this, that I have cried sometimes more at the death of one of my beloved pets than I have for some people that I know. And it just really speaks to the love and the interchange and the exchange of love and passion that we feel for certain animals, and particular animals. Now, we all live on this planet, and there are probably animals, insects, bugs, all kinds of life, and I haven't even began to talk about plant life, that we feel an affinity towards, and then others that are like not so much. And yet, I'd like us to pause for a moment and to think about maybe some of those animals that we don't have an affinity towards, and think about how sometimes as human beings, we can be so cruel to animals, and how some people are cruel to animals. And I know that even just the image of that or the sound of that brings us to that place of like, oh no, how could they? How could they? You know, it's interesting to also be aware of how human beings can be all about like save the whales and, you know, really go all out for animal rights, and yet don't have the same passion for other human beings that are being disenfranchised. What I'm trying to say here and where I'm getting to here is that all life is the unique, unrepeatable, magnificent, powerful way that God shows up. That when you have the opportunity to look into the eyes of a horse, do you actually see a horse? I know I see the horse, and I know that it's the horse, and that as that horse, when I look into that horse's eyes, what I get to see and sense and feel is spirit, is life as the horse. That as I look at the birds of paradise, or as I look at the last couple of days, there's been this, it's about this size right here, a hummingbird that has been coming around on property and just without a tree, just kind of hovering and making its presence known to me. And as tiny as this little thing is, in those moments, I can't necessarily like look deeply into its eyes. And yet there's that connection of like, there is spirit living as this hummingbird. And I don't know that I am that consciously aware when I see a snail. Even though I will pick up a snail and move it out of the way so it doesn't get crunched or stepped on, I know that sometimes I'm intrigued by this snail, but that it takes me a little bit longer to go, wow, this snail is the unique and unrepeatable, magnificent way that spirit, that God is showing up in snail form. That's where I get to do my work. That is exactly where I get to remember and be reminded of the truth of that particular snail, of all snails, of all the slimy, the scaly, the furry, the feathered. What's most interesting about it all is that sometimes we show this willingness to embrace all of life in that way. And when I think about the scaly or the slimy, or maybe even the furry, like a wolf or a coyote, and more and more we hear in the news, especially here in Southern California, about our wilderness kind of burning up, and how the animals that are trapped there, how they are coming out, or how the food in some of our wooded or foresty areas is running out, and these bears and lions and cubs and mountain lions are coming out. The coyotes are coming out of the water beds, and how they're coming and sometimes threatening other life, maybe the life of our chickens and our dogs and cats and small animals. And yet what we know is that in that cycle of life, that God is in all of it. And yet it's interesting how we demonize, if you will, certain animals. And isn't it interesting that as we begin to do that for ourselves and do that, oh, I don't like that, or oh, I like this one, or oh, I like poodles, but I don't like Rottweilers or pit bulls, or how we begin to categorize and stereotype and fall into race consciousness about particular animals and breeds and kinds and things of that nature. Isn't that exactly the same thing we do with humanity? I'm given right now to speak of the story that is known as the Good Samaritan. And interestingly enough, in the story and in this parable, it talked about a man who was walking through a particular town. I'm going to modernize it for us today, who was walking through a particular town, and he fell upon some thieves, some people who beat him up and left him for dead on the side of the road. And how these Pharisees and priests and all these highfalutin folks and all these ultra spiritual folks pass by this person, and now we'll make him a person, right? This person, and left them in the curb, looked, was like, oh yeah, whatevs, and continued to go. I don't have time. I have a speaking engagement. I cannot pause and stop, or I cannot stoop to that level, or what must that person have done in order to have that fate? Where was their consciousness? What did they do to deserve that? It's interesting because the story comes to mind because we we do that. We categorize that. What must that person have done? Oh, they were walking in the wrong neighborhoods. Why are there wrong neighborhoods? Who had they fallen prey to? What kind of town exists that passerbys can attack and steal from this person and beat them up, bring hurt and harm to them? It's interesting. And yet that this Samaritan, this individual, saw fit to gather this person and get them cleaned up and took them to a hotel or some accommodations and paid for a few nights and told the innkeeper, if there are any more charges and expenses, I will be back. Let me know and I will take care of it. I'm wondering what kind of love that Samaritan had for humanity in order to go to such lengths to take care of another human being. Someone who probably was not of the same race, township, maybe even stature or socioeconomic class. Maybe they were. But the love that this person had, this Samaritan had, to go out of their way to make loving accommodations, to make sure that another human being was taken care of. Now, easily, just like everyone else, they could have said, oh, wait a minute, is this person Asian, white, Black, Latino? Are they Arab? Who are they? Are they, is this person a lawyer, a police officer, someone who might be considered a criminal, a religious person? A lot of times we categorize people as animals in the sense of, ooh, that's a snake in the grass. Or you're coming across very bullish, or like a bear, or like a lion or a tiger, you're pouncing on people. My point of it all is coming back to the love that this Samaritan had for another human being, for another life, to pause and recognize life, to recognize that life is not disposable. I'm wondering whether it's animal or human, whether it's plant life, which reminds me, the other day, one of my neighbors down the street, I don't know who it was, just like put out all these plants out on the street. And my neighbor and I are plant rescuers, And we were like, we can't just leave these to go in the trash. We gotta come and, grab these plants, this life. I'm wondering how we can begin to expand our consciousness to include the other, to include those people who may seem disposable, to include the love of wildlife everywhere, to recognize that even when a natural disaster happens, that not only human beings are being displaced, but that in fact, wildlife, what we call the wildlife, the life of animals, insects, birds, bears, lions, cubs, all kinds of life, even the sea creatures, when we're putting stuff in our oceans and polluting our oceans, that this is life. Our water is life. As we look at nature this month, am I recognizing the give and take of nature, the interdependency of nature? Am I acting in a way that includes all life in the products that I use. I know I'm not there yet, but I'm becoming more and more aware of how products are used and if they're tested on animals and things of that nature, or where we put our waste, what's actually recyclable and what actually isn't. Looking at the footprint of our planet. I tend to think that for each of us, it is an individual and collective choice. And by that, I mean that as I go into my own prayer and meditation, and as I begin to ask through my visioning process, that indwelling I am presence for what products to use, what products not to use, what to eat, what not to eat. When I think about eating live fruits and vegetables, that is life entering my body, or what I'm putting into my body to nourish me. When I take even just that, what I use in my hair, the products that I use in my skin, the disposable plastics, when I take that into my prayer and meditation and gently ask Spirit, what is mine to do? And listen with that inner ear. Allow the visions, allow that energy that comes forth from within me to inform me as to what is mine to do. Then I get to do it a little bit at a time. And I begin to actually contribute to the wholeness of not only our planet, but really our galaxy, our world, everything that is around us. Now, you may or may not believe in global warming, and I'm not here to convince anybody. What I do know is that things are shifting and changing. And whether you call that global warming, whether you call it something else, it really doesn't matter. What matters is that as we notice the shift, because shift happens, we have a part to play in that. And so what I am inviting us to do individually and collectively is to enter our own personal visioning process, our own spiritual practice this week, and to begin to recognize and to simply ask that indwelling I am presence. What are the products, the services, what are the foods that are for the highest and the best for me and for the planet? How might I contribute to sustaining the wildlife so that our animals do not become extinct? How do I participate in caring for our earth, for our sky, for our oxygen, for our waters, for our mountains, for all of life? These, beloveds, are questions that I'm inviting you to take into your meditation, to take into your visioning process, to take into your prayer practice, and to begin to also take it into your educational process and become educated, become a little more awake, alert, and aware as to how together we can contribute to a world that works for all life, not just our human life, but all life. So that this way, together, we can simply say, I embrace all of life, including the fuzzy, furry, slimy, and the tiny. It is so, and so it is. Beloveds, if you have benefited from today's program and from today's message, please, again, consider supporting our spiritual teachings. And you can do so by mailing any contribution to the following address or using Zelle or visiting us on our website. It's now time for us to move into prayer. I invite you to simply close your eyes now. And as you breathe in, recognize that you have the breath of life. And not only do you have the breath of life, but you are life itself. For I know that there is a power, a presence, a life. I call that life God, spirit, infinite intelligence, whatever you want to call it. It is God optional, if you will. It is life itself. And it has created everything out of itself. Therefore, my life is life itself. And as I know that this is my truth, I know that this is the truth for each and every one, for all life. Everything that grows, everything that is the unique and unrepeatable way that spirit shows up. And so I honor that. I bless it. I become aware of it and conscious of it. I become aware now of our interconnectedness. And I become aware now to that place where I begin to now consciously support not only my living, but all life. The furry, the scaly, the slimy, the big, the little, the fuzzy, all of life, the plant life. I recognize that life is indeed abundant. So I embrace this abundance in health, in wholeness, in peace, in love, in prosperity. I bless us now, knowing that this message falls upon receptive ears and that we are renewed now by this word, by this message, knowing that our life is indeed the life of God. So as I open my eyes and gaze upon all of life around me, I am reminded to see life in, through, and as each of us. All life, all of it is life. And we honor all life now and forevermore. For this and so much more, I give thanks. I let it be so, and so it is. Beloveds, thank you so much for joining us for today's message, meditation, and prayer, and all of our spiritual practices. All of our spiritual practices together really bring us to our full being. And so I'm simply glad that you're with us.